The morning light crept slowly across the wide ranch as the old cowboy stepped out of his small wooden house and pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders. His name was Tom, and he had lived alone on this land for many years since the world had grown quiet around him. The ranch was not rich or fancy, but it was honest land with long fences, tired barns, and fields that remembered better days. Tom liked the early hours because they did not ask him questions and did not remind him of what he had lost. He walked toward the main gate with steady steps, following the same path he had walked every morning for decades. The wind moved gently through the dry grass and carried the smell of soil and old wood. That was when something large and dark caught his eye near the gate. At first Tom thought it was a shadow, or maybe a cow that had wandered too close during the night. He stopped and leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as the shape slowly became clear. A massive dog stood near the gate, tall, strong, and silent, like it had been placed there on purpose. The dog did not bark or growl or move away. It simply watched Tom with deep eyes that looked tired but calm. Tom felt his chest tighten as he took a careful step closer. He had seen many animals in his life, but this one felt different. The dog's fur was thick and rough, with dust clinging to it like it had traveled a long way. Its body was strong but not wild, and its stance showed patience, not fear. Tom noticed a rope around the dog's neck tied loose enough to show it was not meant to hurt. Hanging from the rope was a small folded piece of paper. Tom's breath slowed as he reached out with shaking fingers. The dog lowered its head slightly, as if allowing the moment to happen. The old cowboy untied the paper and held it carefully, like it might fall apart in his hands. He had not received a note meant just for him in many years. The paper was worn and creased, and the writing was uneven and rushed. Tom could tell whoever wrote it had done so with heavy hands and a heavier heart. The note said the dog's name was Bear and that he was kind and loyal. It said Bear loved open land, quiet nights, and people who spoke gently. Tom swallowed hard as he continued to read. The next lines explained that the writer could no longer keep Bear and had nowhere safe to leave him. The note said the ranch gate was chosen because people spoke of an old cowboy who understood loss. It said the writer hoped Tom would give Bear a chance even if the writer could not return. Tom felt his eyes fill as memories rose up from places he kept buried. He remembered a time when someone he loved had left without being able to say goodbye. The wind moved again, brushing past his face like a soft reminder of the past. Tom folded the note slowly and held it against his chest. Bear stepped forward quietly and rested his large head against Tom's leg. The touch was gentle and full of trust. Tom placed his hand on Bear's head and felt warmth under the rough fur. He whispered that no one should be left behind like that. The ranch felt less empty in that moment, like the land itself had noticed the change. Tom stood there for a long time with his hand resting on the dog. He thought about the many years he had spent talking only to the wind and the cattle. He thought about how quiet his evenings had become after the house lost its laughter. Bear sat beside him patiently, like he already understood the rhythm of this place. The dog did not pull or whine or ask for anything. Tom finally nodded to himself, as if making a promise he had been afraid to make before. He untied the rope from the gate and opened it wide. Bear walked through slowly, staying close to Tom's side. The gate closed behind them with a soft sound that felt final and comforting. Tom led Bear toward the barn where the air smelled of hay and old memories. The dog followed without hesitation, like it had always belonged there. Inside the barn, Tom found an old blanket and spread it near the wall. Bear circled once and lay down with a quiet sigh. Tom watched him for a moment, feeling something warm settle in his chest. He realized the ranch no longer felt like a place he was waiting to leave behind. Outside, the sun climbed higher and the day moved forward. Inside the barn, an old cowboy and a giant dog rested in shared silence. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in many years, Tom did not feel alone on his land. The next morning arrived quietly as the ranch woke under a pale sky, and Tom stepped outside with a cup of warm drink in his hands. The air felt different now, as if the land itself was aware that another soul had joined it. Bear stood near the barn when Tom walked out, strong and still, like a guard watching over something important. The dog lifted his head when he saw Tom and his tail moved slowly against the dirt. Tom nodded at him the way one man might greet another. He was not used to company, but he felt no need to speak either. They walked the fence line together that morning, Tom in front and Bear close behind. The dog matched his pace perfectly, never pulling ahead and never falling back. Tom noticed how Bear watched everything: birds, fences, distant hills, and even the wind. It was the look of a protector, not a wanderer. At the far end of the field, a loose board rattled in the fence. Before Tom could react, Bear stepped forward, placing his body between Tom and the open space. Tom stopped and stared at the dog in surprise. Bear stood firm until Tom fixed the board and nodded in approval. Something settled in Tom's chest then. Trust was not spoken, but it was felt. As the days passed, Bear became part of the ranch rhythm. He followed Tom during chores, rested nearby during breaks, and stayed close at night. The old house no longer echoed the same way it used to. Footsteps, paws, and quiet breaths filled the spaces where silence once lived. Tom spoke to Bear as he worked, telling him stories of the land and the seasons. He talked about storms, cattle lost and found, and long nights spent alone. Bear listened with steady eyes and calm presence, like the stories mattered. Tom realized he was talking more than he had in years. One afternoon, a truck appeared at the edge of the ranch road. It slowed as it approached the gate and stopped. A man stepped out wearing a clean shirt and city shoes. He looked around with curiosity and caution. Bear moved instantly, placing himself beside Tom, his body firm and alert. Tom rested a hand on Bear's head and walked forward. The man asked if Tom was the owner of the ranch. Tom answered simply and waited. The man explained he was from the nearby town and had heard rumors about a large dog. He said some people believed the dog might be dangerous. Tom felt anger rise quietly in his chest. He looked down at Bear, who remained calm and steady. Tom told the man the dog was kind, loyal, and welcome here. He said Bear protected the ranch just like any good worker would. The man hesitated and looked again at the dog. Bear did not move or growl or show fear. The man nodded slowly and apologized before returning to his truck. The dust settled as the vehicle disappeared down the road. Tom let out a breath he did not realize he was holding. Bear leaned gently into his leg once more. That night the wind howled harder than usual and clouds gathered heavy above the fields. Tom prepared the house and barn, knowing a storm was coming. As rain began to fall, Bear remained close, following Tom from place to place. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the old walls. When lightning struck nearby, Bear did not panic. He stood firm, watching the door and listening. Tom remembered another storm many years ago when fear had filled this house. He remembered being alone then too. This time felt different. This time he was not facing it alone. Later that night, Tom heard movement outside the barn. He grabbed a light and stepped out into the rain. Bear moved ahead of him, silently guiding the way. Near the far fence, a young calf had slipped into mud and could not rise. Bear approached carefully, nudging and encouraging without panic. Tom worked beside him, pulling and steadying until the calf stood again. Rain soaked them both, but neither moved away. When it was done, Bear shook off water and looked at Tom with quiet pride. Tom laughed softly, the sound surprising even himself. He patted Bear's side and thanked him. When the storm passed, the ranch stood quiet once more. Tom and Bear rested inside, listening to the calm that followed. Tom realized then that Bear was not just staying. Bear was choosing this place every day. As weeks passed, people in town stopped whispering and started smiling. They saw Tom walking with the giant dog beside him. Children waved from trucks and neighbors nodded with respect. Bear became known as the gentle guardian of the ranch. Tom felt something return to him slowly. Purpose, warmth, and a reason to wake with the sun. One evening, Tom took out the folded note again. He read the words softly and felt gratitude instead of pain. He placed the note in a small wooden box beside old keepsakes. Bear rested his head on Tom's knee, as if understanding. The ranch lights glowed under the night sky. Two lives moved forward together, steady and strong. The seasons slowly began to change, and the ranch shifted its colors as summer moved toward cooler days and softer light. Tom noticed the change in the air each morning, and Bear seemed to sense it too. They started their days earlier, now walking farther across the land, as if checking on everything together. Bear moved with confidence and purpose, like he understood his role completely. Tom found himself smiling more often, even when no one else was around. The quiet no longer felt heavy, and the land no longer felt empty. One morning Tom noticed fresh tracks near the edge of the property. They were not cattle tracks, and they were not familiar. Bear stopped suddenly, and lowered his head, sniffing the ground carefully. His body grew tense, but he did not grow loud. Tom followed his gaze toward the distant trees. Something felt off in the stillness. They moved together slowly, careful not to rush. Bear stayed slightly ahead, watching every movement. Near the tree line they found a broken fence post and signs of struggle in the dirt. Tom's heart began to beat faster. He realized someone or something had crossed onto the ranch during the night. The cattle nearby were restless and uneasy. Bear stepped forward, letting out a low warning sound, not angry but firm. Tom placed a hand on Bear's back, feeling the strength beneath his fur. From behind the trees, a thin, frightened figure appeared. It was a young boy no older than 12, with torn clothes and tired eyes. The boy froze when he saw Bear. Fear washed over his face, and he took a step back. Bear stopped immediately and sat down, lowering his head. Tom stepped forward slowly and spoke gently. The boy hesitated, then finally walked closer. He explained he had been lost for 2 days after running away from a nearby farm. Tom listened quietly, letting the boy speak without interruption. He saw hunger, fear, and exhaustion in the child. Bear moved closer and lay down nearby, calm and steady. The boy relaxed slightly, seeing the dog was not a threat. Tom offered the boy water and food from his pack. The boy ate slowly, like he was afraid it might disappear. They walked back to the ranch together, Bear watching from behind. The boy kept glancing at the dog with growing curiosity. At the house, Tom prepared a warm meal and a clean place to rest. The boy sat quietly, watching everything with wide eyes. Bear lay near the door, never leaving the room. His presence brought calm to everyone inside. After resting, the boy told more of his story. He spoke of hard days and feeling unseen and unwanted. Tom felt old memories stir within him. He remembered times when he too felt lost without knowing where to go. Tom promised the boy he would help him return safely. He said no one should feel alone in the world. The next day, Tom contacted people in town. Word traveled fast, and soon the boy's family was found. When they arrived, they were filled with relief and tears. They thanked Tom again and again. The boy hugged Bear before leaving. Bear stayed still, letting the moment happen. As the truck drove away, Tom felt a quiet ache. But it was not sadness. It was the feeling of having done something right. Bear walked beside him back toward the house. Days passed and life returned to its steady pace. But something had shifted again on the ranch. People in town spoke with respect about the old cowboy and his dog. They spoke of kindness and trust. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the ranch. Tom recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from the person who had left Bear at the gate. Tom's hands shook as he opened it. The letter spoke of gratitude and relief. It explained that leaving Bear had been the hardest choice ever made. The writer thanked Tom for giving Bear a home and purpose. They said knowing Bear was safe allowed them to move forward. Tom folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the first note. Bear watched quietly from his place near the window. Tom sat down and rested his hand on Bear's head. He told him that sometimes doing the right thing hurts at first. Bear leaned into the touch, calm and sure. The bond between them felt unbreakable now. That evening the sky turned gold as the sun lowered. Tom and Bear stood at the gate together. The same gate where Bear had once waited alone. Now it stood as a symbol of something new. Tom realized the ranch had become more than land. It had become a place of second chances. As the stars appeared, Tom felt peace settle over him. Bear remained at his side, watching the world quietly. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they were ready to face it together. The final months of the year arrived slowly and wrapped the ranch in quiet mornings and cool evenings. Tom woke each day with steady purpose, and Bear was always there waiting near the door. The land showed signs of wear from time, but it stood strong just like the two who cared for it. Tom moved a little slower now, and Bear seemed to understand, staying closer than before. One morning Tom felt a sharp pain in his chest while working near the barn. He stopped and leaned against the wooden wall, breathing carefully. Bear noticed instantly and pressed his body against Tom's side. His eyes stayed locked on Tom, filled with concern and focus. Tom sat down slowly and rested until the pain passed. He whispered that he was fine, but Bear did not move away. From that day on, Bear watched Tom more closely than ever. He stayed near during chores and followed every step. Neighbors noticed the change when Tom visited town less often. They began stopping by the ranch to check on him. Bear greeted each visitor calmly, but never left Tom's side. The dog had become more than a companion. One cold evening Tom sat by the fire with Bear lying nearby. He looked around the house filled with warmth and quiet life. Tom spoke softly about the years gone by and the people he had lost. Bear listened with steady presence like always. Tom admitted he had once believed his life was finished. He said he never expected a second beginning. The fire crackled gently and the night pressed against the windows. Bear lifted his head and rested it on Tom's knee. In that moment Tom understood something deeply. Bear had not just been left at the gate. Bear had arrived with purpose and timing beyond chance. They had saved each other in different ways. As winter settled in, the ranch faced its hardest storm yet. Snow fell thick and heavy, covering everything in white. The power went out and the world grew silent. Tom prepared blankets and food while Bear stayed alert. During the night the cold grew sharper. Tom's breathing became shallow and slow. Bear sensed something was wrong and moved close. He nudged Tom gently, trying to keep him awake. When Tom did not respond, Bear went to the door and barked loudly. The sound carried through the storm farther than expected. A neighbor heard and came rushing despite the weather. Help arrived just in time. Tom was taken to safety and cared for through the storm. Bear refused to leave his side. Days later Tom returned to the ranch, weaker but alive. The house felt warmer than ever before. People from town came bringing food, firewood, and kindness. They thanked Bear for saving Tom. Bear accepted the attention, quietly staying close to Tom. The bond between them was now known by everyone. As spring returned, the land came back to life. Flowers pushed through the soil and the air softened. Tom walked the ranch again, leaning on his staff with Bear beside him. Every step felt like a gift. At the gate Tom stopped and looked out across the fields. Bear stood tall at his side. Tom smiled and said that this place would always be open to those in need. Bear wagged his tail slowly. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of hope and second chances. As the sun set on the horizon, Tom and Bear stood together. Two souls who found each other at the right moment. The gate closed gently behind them, and the ranch moved forward with a quiet, strong heart.